Today, we are excited to welcome Tania Menesse. Tania is the president and CEO of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, an intermediary whose mission is to foster the equitable revitalization of neighborhoods throughout Cleveland by strengthening the community development ecosystem. Tania came to Cleveland at the age of 4 when her family moved here from India, and she grew up in Shaker Heights, left for college, but moved back to Cleveland with her family 18 years ago after spending time in Dallas and Denver to focus her career on the revitalization of Greater Cleveland. Prior to joining CNP, she worked with the City of Shaker Heights and the City of Cleveland. She serves on the boards of Destination Cleveland, IdeaStream, Digital C, Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and Greater Ohio Policy Center, and is a member of the Levin College Visiting Committee and the CDA Community Advisory Committee. And she is also a graduate of our Leadership Cleveland class of 2022. Please welcome Tania.
Thank you, Rachel. Good to see all of you. I appreciate you spending your lunch with me. I need to update my bio because it's been 20 years now, which is hard to believe, but really amazing. Back in Cleveland, and I am sharing my screen and hopefully succeeding in doing that after all of these years. Okay, I think we're good. Yay. All right, first accomplishment of the session. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk about Cleveland's community development ecosystem and the support that CNP provides it today. I've been with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress about 5 years now, and we went through a strategic planning process that really recentered CNP's work on the health of the CDC ecosystem. We believe really strongly that every neighborhood, the residents and the small businesses are best served if you've got an organization on the ground that can articulate those needs, serve those residents, and really carry forth during any kind of planning process or project advocacy. The voice of the community is really best represented by those organizations on the ground. Our job is to support them with real estate, with support, with access to capital, with advocacy, with marketing, raising funds. And so that's really what I'm going to speak to today. As I started with the organization, it was very clear that after really 10 years since the foreclosure, well, at that time, it was 10 years since the foreclosure crisis, now almost 15, and COVID, CDCs were being asked to do everything. And I think when we all know that when you try to be all things to all people, you generally don't do a very good job. And so one of the first things that we did 3 years ago is we worked across the board with all these different partners, but most importantly with CDCs themselves to begin to define what their core work should be. And this is a favorite slide I like to put up because literally all through our conference room at CNP's offices were slides like this, where we had been working not just with the executive director leadership at the CDCs, but also all of their staff to really begin to define from, what at some point was over 250 things. I probably don't have that number completely right, of what CDCs did to an environment where there were 7 core areas, really, 6 core areas, if I can count, 5 that are work that we delivered to the neighborhoods. And then within those core areas, what are the services that we provide so that we could really articulate to funders, to partners, to the City of Cleveland, to City Council that we work with, that yes, it is incredibly important to deliver an after-school program, to work with seniors, but the gap that community development corporations fill and CNP fills in neighborhoods is very place-based, and it's very much about engaging with residents, ensuring that there's a strong neighborhood plan, ensuring that the voice of the neighborhood, the story of the neighborhood is told through marketing, and that all of that other work that CDCs don't do, that there is partnering that the CDC does with other organizations in the community to help deliver those services. Often the most important role a CDC plays is that convening entity. So we realized very quickly that the grants that CNP provides, so we pool funds from our legacy funders. So again, we're an intermediary from the Cleveland Foundation, from the Gunn Foundation, from the Mandel Foundation, and now in smaller amounts from St. Luke's Key Bank, and the Rocket Community Fund. Those grants are critically important. They're flexible dollars, very difficult to come by. But alongside that, we needed to be providing technical assistance to CDCs directly as they had challenges with projects in their neighborhoods, and then overall begin to start, and we're really finally getting to this now, to provide the kind of back office core services across the system that pretty much every CDC needs. And often the larger challenges at community development corporations are less about expertise in helping to repair a home versus working with a business, and more about what all nonprofits struggle with, and we know, which is fiscal health and board development and HR and all of those things that are so critically important but difficult to do when you're running a small organization. The other thing we quickly identified is that the CDC system was best funded, and no big surprise, was most productive in the late 90s and early 2000s, again, before the foreclosure crisis. And I cannot stress how much the CDC system and the neighborhoods of Cleveland struggled after the foreclosure crisis, because so much of the revenue that fed what CDCs did beyond grant dollars was real estate oriented, and almost all of that real estate was upside down after the foreclosure crisis. But this was also a time when there was a lot of that operational training support that was going on with CDCs, and it's important to be conscious of that. With that said, the other piece, and I'm sorry, the coloring on the slide's a little bit difficult to see, but the most important part here to see is that those teal bars are the funding from City Council in the city of Cleveland. And it is just disproportionately so much larger, 4 times what we put out and CDC's raised from other funds. This is not inclusive of everything, but it really helps illustrate that what we have pivoted to in the last couple of years, and so much of our focus is on, is advocacy. Because as we identify those chunks of work that CDCs did, what we realize is the largest funder, which is City Council in the city of Cleveland, really only funded a fraction of that. And I experienced this when I was working for the city of Cleveland, this frustration that I knew that CDCs were doing incredible work marketing their neighborhoods, helping to shepherd a neighborhood plan, doing the really tough work of engagement and empowerment with residents. And almost none of that was eligible with federal community development block grant money. So you see those checks there are really what could be utilized. And so what we have is we don't ever get a good picture from reporting with the city on the actual work that CDCs are doing. And so this is just another visual of that, right? If you can imagine all of the iterated work that an organization does, how I often talk about it is, if you think you're getting a report card and you're not a very strong math student, which I was not, and the only thing that you ever get reported on is math, that really gives a very distorted picture to the broader community about the performance of your work. And that's essentially, in basic terms, what we have as long as CDCs are funded by federal community development block grant funds. So a little over 2 years ago, we started working with city partners, with funders, to put forward a new way to fund CDCs. And that really looked at, first and foremost, mirroring the buckets of work and the CDC Advancement and Resilience Program that we put together with the CDCs and with funders. So another major goal we have is to try to, as much as we can, have a parallel process between the city of Cleveland and other funding entities. So we're all looking at the same data, we're all judging work similarly, and then you don't have small organizations trying to meet many different funders in many different ways. We know there's the reality of that is that happens anyway, but if your largest funders are looking at the same data, it's very helpful. One of the main things about the program that we stressed on a continuous basis was that it is all about transparency and accountability. There has been so much conversation in the community about the fact that, is this a worthy investment to invest in community development corporations? If we put community development corporations into the general fund, is that a good use of city funds? And I think that's such an important question to ask. And what the legislation that was put forward and introduced in January seeks to put forward is yes, CDC should compete with all of the other priorities of the city on an annual basis to stay in the budget. No one is trying to step away from that. But what we want our communities to judge on is a full transparency of what a community development corporation does in the neighborhoods. And I'm going to go back to this slide because I think when we look at the work that CDCs do, there's such a strong connection to the delivery of services for the city of Cleveland. And one of the things is we've been advocating for this change in funding, which would be the first change in 30 years, is to really look at the fact that much of what a community development corporation does is work that the city relies on. So a good example is they will work with a developer or a home builder on their application for plan review at the city. That is something that would fall back to the city to do if a CDC wasn't able to do that work. And it's just one of many examples of where, in a really positive way, that on the ground work that the city needs done is work that a CDC does in a neighborhood with a council person. So as we introduce that legislation in January, I think we all know there has been a great deal of noise and upheaval coming from the federal government that has very much muddied the water on the direction of this work and frankly has so many important organizations in our communities under a lot of stress. But specifically here, when you look at organizations that are in a funding stream that right now is funded for this current fiscal year, but that notice only came in May. We are actually today in front of City Council during their summer meeting for an emergency ordinance that will help fund a portion of the system to help bridge the fact that we won't see federal funding coming to the CDCs probably for several months. And so what we keep coming back to is this is not a tenable way long term to fund a system that's really critical to the health of Cleveland's neighborhoods. I think we go back to a place where we have to, as a community, and I think this is such an important question that we're all grappling with, make a decision on whether we see enough value in the work that's happening on the ground in neighborhoods to properly fund it and evaluate it on a regular basis, and to be really honest about the fact that if there are other priorities that are going to take precedence, while we will, of course, make the argument that that's not a good decision, but that it is in a time when it is difficult to think about all of the different funding priorities that the city and communities have. It is a fair discussion to have, but community development corporations and the work that the work that CMP does to support them is really not as effective as it can and should be with the ongoing uncertainty that we have. And so much of what we're advocating for is that legislation moves forward and that the community has an opportunity to make a decision on whether CDCs should be funded in the general fund or really we are looking at a significant change in how the system works. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully we can jump into some questions that you've posed to Rachel.
Great, Tania, thank you so much. So as this uncertainty around funding has been looming over the past few months, how have you worked with your team and how has your team worked with the CDCs to help them navigate this period of uncertainty?
Well, I will provide the positive view first. Is one of the really important things that we have worked to do is to build an advocacy arm on our own team and then really help the CDCs learn how to advocate for themselves in ways that are comfortable. And I think we all know it is very difficult to challenge your largest funder, but often it is critically important to do and important to do in a respectful way because often the communities that fund you don't necessarily understand fully the value that you provide. And so the two things that I think are really positive that will take us forward is we've really done a lot of work with the CDCs and our own team on storytelling, right? And explaining the work that would not happen in a Clark Fulton but for a CDC, explaining that this is not meant to be confrontational, but if you don't have a community development corporation helping feed the pipeline of small businesses coming to City Hall to use incentive programs, that pipeline is probably going to fall off, right? So there's a really constructive way to make sure that people understand the ramifications of CDCs not being there. And that is a level of advocacy that's critically important that we can do for CDCs, but they have to do for themselves, right? Nobody can tell their story better than they can. We can help them do that, but them telling their story themselves to their residents, to their partners, certainly to City Council and the administration, to other funders, is really the best way to have that message be delivered. And then the other piece that is just really brass tacks is the program that we fund, which again is a fraction of the dollars that keep CDCs afloat. We have worked really hard with our funding partners to provide as much flexibility in that program and to shore up operations so that CDCs don't have to furlough and lay off staff in these moments when we hope it's just a timing issue to see funds versus a longer term systemic issue.
Since there are so many CDCs across Greater Cleveland, how might you work and how do you work towards fostering collaboration between them?
Mm-hmm. So because everybody doesn't live and breathe this like I do every day, there are 17 neighborhood CDCs. So that's down from probably 35, some in the late 90s, where there was really a CDC for every neighborhood. And then in that number, I don't include Downtown Cleveland Inc. and University Circle Inc. and some of the larger organizations. One of the positive things that's come from a raft of new leaders, there are challenges there as people are learning organizations in a difficult time, but there is also much more of an understanding and interest in collaborating across the system. And that was a little bit of what I was talking about of more of a willingness to look at, and this is frankly the trust that we've built with CDCs now over the last 3 or 4 years. I didn't talk about this, but we've repositioned our staff so we could very intentionally be much more on the ground with CDC, supporting their day-to-day work, and try to move from being a traditional funder, which is fine, to really an intermediary where we are really sharing with them. We need to know what your problems are, your biggest challenges are, if we're really going to be able to help you with those. That fosters and encourages collaboration because there's a level of vulnerability as executive directors get together and they start to see, okay, we are really experiencing a lot of the same issues. So maybe we don't need to do everything alone. Everything from, can we begin to contract for IT services together? Can we build a pool of HR expertise? Because frankly, we're not doing HR right now because none of us can afford to do it. Can we think about, which is what we're doing today, we are marketing neighborhoods through a program called Love Cleveland Neighborhoods. So trying to show that value of you don't have to give up your autonomy as an independent organization in a neighborhood by sharing tools and services. And I want to be clear, we are just scratching the surface on that, but there is a lot of willingness and interest to do so, so that CDCs can focus on the work at hand in the neighborhoods.
So as you look to support all 17 CDCs across the community, how do you prioritize the limited funding and the support among them?
So I think there are two sides to that. So from a pure funding perspective, that CDC assessment or that creation, of what are the core work that CDCs do, that lent itself to an assessment model where on an annual basis, CDCs first self-assess themselves and we pay them to do that work, that data gathering that has resulted in what will be longitudinal data. Again, great to have storytelling, but you also have to have data about what organizations are accomplishing. Throughout a year, we go through and again, start with their self-assessment, self-reporting, and then an evaluation of the work that's being done. Again, all in that sense of how do we improve? How do we get every CDC to a certain threshold where everybody is able to serve the neighborhood under those 5 key services? That then drives each year, and again, we're only in year 2 of this work, or we just finished year 2. We're starting year 3 of this work. A grant process that's very collaborative, where we're looking at, the last year and this year will focus on operations and staff, right? The human capital, because that's really what drives the work in neighborhoods, and it's also what's hardest to fundraise for. And we have a committee that is of funders and board members that ultimately makes decisions on that pool of funds. From a staff perspective, it's slightly different. I mean, we really do. Our model when I started this process was to ensure that we were supporting CDCs across the city. In the past, CMP went through a model where they were really just supporting 9 to 11 CDCs at a time, with at least, core services. We've again had a relationship manager assigned to a pool of CDCs. So money doesn't necessarily equate, staff support. Those two don't necessarily go together.
Tania, there's some interest in understanding some of the economic development work that CNP supports in the various neighborhoods. And how do you help businesses potentially choose neighborhoods and invest towards those who live there?
So the role of business attraction in a neighborhood is really core to the work a CDC does. We don't work on business attraction work and direct a business to a certain neighborhood or CDC unless that CDC brings us in, or there is work that's being done potentially with the city of Cleveland or brokers who come to us. Then we generally are recommending that they work directly with the CDC, and we support the CDC in that work. A slightly different view and maybe a little bit of where that question is going is New Village Corporation, which is CMP's real estate arm. We do work in certain neighborhoods in the city. We currently own Shaker Square, which is a massive project and kind of outside of our traditional neighborhood scale real estate work, which is really looking at strengthening commercial corridors and in our middle neighborhoods, renovating homes very adjacent to those commercial corridors to move, hopefully, the market in those neighborhoods. There are very few neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland where if somebody wants to renovate their own home, or a business or property owner wants to invest in their property, they can just go to a bank and get that loan. Right. For the most part, the market is not functioning in a way that happens. So our lending arm and real estate arm get very involved in that work. Again, often alongside a CDC, sometimes directly with the neighborhood. And I'm hesitating as I'm saying that as we're going through actually a planning process right now with our real estate arm that is going to have us be much more involved in real estate in the neighborhoods, again, to support CDCs moving forward, but also private developers that are coming into the city, looking at neighborhood scale projects, feeling that they don't pencil or the risk is too high and walking away. And our hope is over the next couple of years, we can be that nonprofit partner alongside the CDC and other partners like the Land Bank, Habitat, others that could see more projects move forward in the neighborhoods.
Do you anticipate any impact on your work from Cleveland's reduction in the number of wards?
Yes. um, One of the things I started to do when I moved into this role was realize that CDCs really needed a lot of help in brokering and working on their relationship with their council representatives, because many of them work with many council representatives as well as City Hall. So in differing degrees, as we have a new slate of council people probably coming in, we'll be involved. We were very pleased that the council president asked us to help with orientation for the last round of council people coming in. So often, it's really the best thing we can do for a CDC is help the council person better understand their role. And it's a lot to figure out as you're getting started. CDCs will be working with new council people because wards don't line up with CDCs. So I anticipate that will be a lot of the work that we do going into the new calendar year.
And looking back over the past year, CMP launched the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative. Can
Mhm.
you share a bit about that initiative and some of the work that's happened so far?
Yeah, so that's a really fun one. And I sort of alluded to it. This is research, this is a national initiative to look at neighborhoods across the country that have traditionally been stable, right? Those are the neighborhoods where people are most civically active. They're almost exclusively single family neighborhoods. So in Cleveland, it's neighborhoods like Lee Harvard, Collinwood, West Park, and Old Brooklyn. That's where we focused. But those neighborhoods over the years, as the population has aged and as the housing has aged, they are tipping in a direction that starts moving them out of the market and makes it often very difficult for people who want to stay in those neighborhoods to justify reinvesting in their homes, reinvesting in their businesses. So we were really excited 3 years ago. The state operating budget and the city helped us amass a pool of about $11 million. And we're very focused in on certain commercial corridors and areas in those four neighborhoods I mentioned. We've purchased 20 homes. Um, we are in the process of renovating those homes. Two are on the market for sale, one in Old Brooklyn and one in the Jefferson Puritas neighborhood. And alongside that, right within half a mile, we're focused on that commercial corridor, helping property owners there uh, redo their storefront, their signage, and then what we call white boxing, which is essentially preparing their property for a new tenant. What tends to happen is places stay vacant for a long time because the property owner doesn't have the dollars to improve the property, and then no tenant is ready to move in. So we're trying to break that cycle. With the idea that we can begin to report out to our funders and supporters that we're starting to see residents in those neighborhoods start to reinvest in their own neighborhoods. Um, and we are able to attract and retain more residents into the city and businesses. So we're just a couple years into that work, but excited that we retained an earmark in the state operating budget, considerably smaller, but still we'll keep this work going for another couple years. And our real estate strategy is really looking at building on that and being able to do more home repair and rehab in those neighborhoods as well.
So, as you look ahead for the work of CNP, what type of support do you need from those of us on the call in the community?
Well, I think that, as I said, it is always a challenge to tell the story of an intermediary, but even more for community development corporations on the ground that are trying to keep their doors open, the important work that they're doing to sustain their communities. And if you're a Cleveland resident, I would really ask that you reach out to your council person and encourage them to move legislation 113/2025 to change the funding source for CDCs. It is, I mean, I'm really not going to sugarcoat it. We're really in a pivotal moment where I think if CDCs stay and federal funding will really not have the system in place to support residents and businesses in a year or two.
Tanya, we have time for one last question. Out of all of the Cleveland neighborhoods, what is one of our hidden gem neighborhoods that we should check out?
Oh my gosh, that is a very unfair question. Um, But I will say Collinwood is, I think that people have no concept of the fact that this is a neighborhood that sits on Cleveland's lakefront, has an amazing music scene, uh, has these beautiful front porches in the neighborhoods, and East 185th has wonderful new businesses. And one of the main things that we're really trying to push with Love Cleveland Neighborhoods. So I'd encourage you all, if you want to explore Cleveland neighborhoods, we launched that last year. Um, you will see profiles of all of the neighborhoods reasonably soon. We have 12 up there right now. But it is really to encourage that pride that Destination Cleveland created in Cleveland over the last 10 years, moving that needle. Now we're really trying to create that pride, frankly, in neighborhood residents first in themselves. So they'll recommend their neighborhoods to others and be excited about visiting other neighborhoods in Cleveland. That's what I should have said, Rachel, when I said, what's the best thing that you can do? Is go visit Love Cleveland neighborhoods, pick a neighborhood you've never been to, and go visit it this summer. And I think you'll be really impressed and excited about what you see.
Well, Tanya, thank you. And we will be sure to share that link in the follow-up email and encourage everyone to check it out and to share in their networks. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate all you and your team are doing.
Thank you so much for the time, and thank you all of you for attending. Really appreciate it.